All right, we are live. All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 6 of Ryan Cinematic Obsessions. This is something I've been wanting to do really all week. Um, you know, I'm going to talk about it in a second, but the Oscars mean a lot to me. Not saying that what I say or what they do is Best Picture, what they do is all these awards. I don't say that that's like 100% correct, but I've always followed the Oscars my whole life, and I'll get to that in a second. Let's just say that the Oscars are important to me. Every year, I look forward to watching the ceremony, and I've been wanting to do this live stream because I've also been wanting to talk about some of my favorite Best Picture winners of the past. Which today we're going to be talking about 24 of them after I kind of do a wrap up of last night's Oscars. But as many of you who know that are friends with me on Facebook, I just got done brewing a cup of coffee. Just woke up a little while ago. I stayed up pretty late last night because of the Oscars, and I stayed up a little bit afterwards, um, just on social network and all different social networks, and just doing my thing, talking about the Oscars, that kind of thing. But oh, that tastes so good. But yeah, I've been wanting to do a live stream. Originally I was going to do it on Friday, and then I realized, you know what, I don't think it's going to, because I do every episode of this series on Fridays. And then I started realizing, you know what, why don't we just do it, closer to the Oscars, to where it isn't just, it's all over social networking, it's all over social media, like I just said. Sorry, I'm still trying to wake up a little bit. It's all over the internet. It's all over everything, talking about the Oscars, the Oscars. So I didn't want to go all crazy and just spam everybody's YouTube feed and all that stuff with stuff about it. But then I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do it on Oscar night. And then when Oscar, yesterday I was having some really bad allergy stuff. I feel like my eyes were like swollen shut, and all that fun stuff. But I started feeling better last night, and I actually woke up today. Still allergy. My eyes are still really, really, filled with pollen and everything. If you go outside, you can actually see pollen like on the sides of the roads. I mean, it's disgusting. Just you just see like a yellow powder just along the side of the road from the cars, I guess, brushing it aside. That's just how it is. Um, but like I said, yeah, I've been wanting to do this stream, and I was going to do it last night, but I was like, you know what? I think it'd just be better if I do it first thing Monday morning. So, yes, I'm coming at you first thing Monday morning with an post-Oscar live stream episode of Ryan Cinematic Obsessions. Um, yes, so that means there's going to be 2 episodes of Ryan Cinematic Obsessions this week. I'm not sure if Friday's episode will be a full-length episode because of this. Not sure yet, but expect something on Friday as well. And I hope you guys are enjoying this series so far. I'm trying to keep it, consistent, so you guys could expect it every week. So far, so good. Of course, some subjects I'm sure will be more, talked about than others, and people will actually care about some more subjects than others. But I understand that, and so that's why I don't really go into these videos wishing they would get a million views. I just enjoy doing them, because for the most part, this series has been doing pretty good, which I'm really glad, because it's something that means a lot to me, and something I've always kind of wanted to do, to where I just have a consistent weekly series about film. Doesn't matter when it is, just a consistent series. Sorry if you can hear me drinking my coffee. It's really hot, so of course I have to make little noises when I when I sip on it. Um, if you're watching this live on YouTube, try to see if you could get over to the Google Hangout portion, because I'm using the Q&A on that. So at this point, I'm not really doing any questions on YouTube. I'm just doing the one over here on Google Hangout. So last night's Oscars. I was looking forward to last night's Oscars because a lot of films that I love were actually. I'm actually gonna pull up like the winners from last night. So if you guys send me, I don't see anybody watching yet. So if anybody sends me a question, I'm not seeing it at this point yet. Um, So yes, last night's Oscars. I was looking forward to last night's Oscars. A lot of the films that were up for Best Picture and up for Oscars in general were films that I loved. Um, of course, the main films that I was supporting from the beginning. Um, Spotlight was one of them, and then The Revenant, um, Bridge of Spies, and especially Mad Max Fury Road. But the two that I guess I could actually sit down and actually say are like my favorite in terms of because even since I put up my top 10 favorite of last year list, it's already changed just because of rewatching films and stuff like that. And of course, Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens is actually my favorite film of last year. But Spotlight and Mad Max Fury Road and Bridge of Spies are pretty much tied. I love those films so much, and it's changed a little bit based on rewatch value. I think Spotlight in the future is going to be a film that's looked upon like All the President's Men. I think that Mad Max Fury Road is going to be looked upon in some capacity. How we look back at not in a grandiose not like a big grandiose like experience like Star Wars was when it first came out in 1977, but I think we're gonna be looking back on it like how we look back on Terminator 2, how we look back on Alien, these great epic action films that really mean a lot. I feel like that's how we're gonna be looking back on Mad Max Fury Road. Bridge of Spies, I feel like we're gonna be looking back on it in the same way that we look back on um, you know, the great Cold War films of, the 70s and 80s. Um, I love Cold War films. It's like one of my favorite genres of that. And a couple of years ago, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy was one of my favorite films of the year, one of the best Cold War films I've ever seen. But as that film has gone on, like I love it. I really love the film. I don't see people looking back on that film in the same way that they're going to be looking back on Bridge of Spies. I know a lot of that probably because Spielberg, is Spielberg. He has his own. His name kind of markets a film anyways. But I have a feeling we're going to be looking back on that film almost like how we look back on, The Spy Who Came in from the Cold, and uh, just a bunch of different Cold War films of yesteryear, I guess you could say. And I thought it was really well done. I think the script from that was co-written by the Coen brothers, and I forget the other screenwriter's name. I think is Matt Chairman let me look. I should have. Let's see. Well, I forgot his Chayman or something. I forgot his name, but it was there was 3 writers on the film, and so I just think that's how we're going to be looking back at those films. I think we're going to be looking back at The Revenant almost like how we look back at the epic, I guess you could say. I would even say almost how we look back at like Terrence Malick films, like uh, The Thin Red Line, not necessarily Tree of Life, maybe to a extent, but I think we're going to look back on that film like even like Dances with Wolves and epics like that. So I think we're going to be looking back on these films differently, and I think that is why some of these films were up for so much. I know a lot of people this morning are kind of annoyed that The Revenant didn't get Best Picture. I could see the annoyance because I love all the films that were up, but I think that as time goes by, we will look back and say, okay, that was maybe the right choice. Who knows? But like I said, like I don't put 100% into these Oscars. I really just enjoy the ceremony as it is, and I do think that getting an Oscar is a big deal, like in a career sense. I think a lot of people's dream that is involved with film and is to win an Oscar. That's like the go-to thing. But I don't put a lot of stock into thinking, okay, just because that film won an Oscar, just because that person won an Oscar, that's the end all be all. That's awesome. I'm so glad Leo got his Oscar. He deserved it, especially for The Revenant. I don't think it was a career win, because I think every role he puts out, he puts 110%. I think it was great. But there's a lot of actors that never got Oscars. I mean, if you could, I mean, other than honorary Oscars, there's a lot of people that just would never. I mean, Peter O'Toole's another one who never won an Oscar. It was more of an honorary one. Henry Fonda never won an Oscar. Jimmy Stewart never won an Oscar. And like, there's a lot of famous people that did not win Oscars. So I don't really put a lot of stock into that. I just think that it's just something, a nice little addition onto like in film history that I just love. Let me shoot back over to see. I know the last time I did a live stream, the questions part wasn't really working. So we'll see. But yeah, overall last night, I definitely enjoyed it. You know, there is the issue, you know, with diversity within the Oscars, and that's been an issue. And obviously you could look at the Oscars and tell there is an issue with diversity. And I don't think it just is in terms of race. I think it's in terms of film as well. Like, you know, certain films don't get the light of day. Independent films, you know, we had a great surge of independent films getting Oscars, you know, in the 90s. And a lot of that was thanks to, you know, the Weinstein brothers and, you know, Miramax and their whole system that they had in the 90s. And they've kind of morphed into just like all the other studios to me, like the Weinsteins and stuff. I think they used to be really hardcore pro independent film, and I still think they're pro independent film. You know, it's a pro independent film studio. I mean, they're not with Miramax; they have the Weinstein Company now. But I think we've come to a place where we've moved away again from that, and I think the Oscars, and I think that some of the rules and stuff, the changes will benefit from it. But in terms of, you know, diversity, it's across the board. Everybody, there's an issue with diversity in regards to everything, and I think we've been talking about it for years, just about how certain films don't get shown the light of day. Mainly, you know, I think we need to change the rules about how, you know, some films are nominated. Why could they be nominated? You know, if a film is on Netflix, you know, like just different films that are on Netflix that are released, you should be able to get an Oscar nomination. I think they need to change the rules with that. We're in a different age. We have studios that are making films that, you know, we have Amazon.com financing TV shows and movies. I mean, we're in a different age. We need to adapt with the times in terms of some of this stuff. So Chris Rock is the host. I've been a Chris Rock fan, you know, my whole life pretty much. You know, I've always thought he was hilarious. I've really specifically always thought that he handled racial humor really well. To me, there's nobody funnier that talks about white people other than Chris. I mean, than Chris Rock. I think he knocks it out of the park every time. I always put him up there with like Richard Pryor in terms of that. But I was disappointed somewhat with his performance last night because I told my wife before the series, before the episode started, I was like, man, I hope he just goes for it. Literally the first second that he gets on stage, he starts knocking it out of the park. He starts offending people. And I think his opening monologue, while it offended a lot of people, I thought that was kind of what I was hoping he would do. I was hoping he wasn't going to go the route of how, you know, I thought Neil Patrick Harris was really boring last year. I thought he was one of the worst hosts that we've had in a while. So I was really hoping Chris Rock would go for it. Just go for it. Just see what you could, you know, start within the first few minutes of this ceremony. Get people, break the ice. You know, everybody, it's the elephant in the room, I guess you could say. And go ahead and start. So he goes for it. And, you know, people cheer. But there were some very, very awkward jokes. And that's when you could tell that these people don't necessarily always write their jokes. You could tell that the Academy had writers, because some of these jokes that I heard Chris Rock saying, I'm just like, that doesn't even sound like a Chris Rock joke. He doesn't even sound like that's something that he would say. So I think it kind of, I think it came to the point where it became kind of redundant. It wasn't really, I think the first monologue that he did was hilarious, and some of the other stuff along the side was hilarious. But after a while, I think it became too redundant, and so it became kind of boring. So I was kind of glad, like the latter half of the ceremony, where he was just kind of not there as much. But overall, I really enjoyed the ceremony. I don't think there's been a fun ceremony really for a while. I think that I wish that the ceremonies themselves would actually go back to being, if it was me, I would love to have each year, like how it was before, a theme. You know, for instance, this year could have been um, the epics or something like that, and or the films of the '70s or something like that. And each the decoration on the stages and like the way they introduced the films and all that stuff, it had that kind of a ring to it and a theme to it. I think that would be more fun, by far. And I think that they have a long way to go in terms of making the ceremonies more um, entertaining. And but I'm gonna stick with it because I'm just I've always been an Oscars nut. Guess my little history with the Oscars is the fact that I grew up watching the Oscars. My mom, as you guys have heard in the past, is a major film buff. That's where I get my love of film from. That's where I get. Um, I mean, we have the same favorite film of all time, The Godfather. Like me and my mom see eye to eye on a lot of stuff. We get together, we talk about movies for a while, and people look at us like we're crazy because we're just talking about movies. So I grew up watching the Oscars, but other than that, I didn't just grow up watching the Oscars. I grew up reading film books. My mom would like look at film books with me. She would show me her film books. So I had a book from like probably like the mid '80s or early '90s, and it was an Oscar book, and it had all the past winners and all that stuff. And I would look at that book all the time as a kid. I don't think I have that book anymore. I don't think I ever. I think I don't think I have that book anymore. But I have another Oscar book that I got in the early 2000s, and that has all the Oscar winners. And there was a time period when I was just getting into film when I would go down all these years and just look at all the best pictures, and I would go search out those films. So obviously, some of these films are not the best pictures of those years, like when we look back, because but um, it doesn't mean they're not good films or great films. But it would be cool if like they would do almost like three, best pictures for three films. Like there was, the three best pictures of the year. That would be pretty awesome. Um, but that's getting off track. So I've always been in the Oscars. I remember a time where I was younger, like, probably an early teen, and I would actually kind of be annoying to like some of my friends. Like we would like, there'd be like a show or something like on the other side of town, like, punk band or something like that playing. And um, I was into that scene. So like I was at shows all the time, but I would choose like on some nights I would choose those Oscar like the Oscars Sunday Oscars over like seeing a show just because that's how it's always been. I've been on vacation before, and I went out of my way to make sure I was around the TV, and that was as a teenager. Well, not as a teenager. I think I was like 10 or 11. So it's always been I've always caught the ceremony. Didn't always agree 100% with everything. In fact, some of the ceremonies now are just time like just time waster. I'm just trying to get through so it gets to some awards because sometimes I think it slows down. But this year I think the pace was faster this year. But sorry, I keep getting off track. But overall, this year's Oscars, I thought it was great. All the films that I loved were shown, you know, some love. Of course, Star Wars: The Force Awakens, I don't think won anything. I think it was expected to win. I think visual effects or something like that. But it lost to Ex Machina, which had a budget that was like, a quarter of The Force Awakens, but actually way less than a quarter of that budget. But I know that was an upset. But I I was happy that I watched an Oscars where my favorite films were battling it out for the top spot, and they all kind of got it like a piece of the action. The Revenant got some Oscars and Best Director, much like Steven Spielberg did for Saving Private Ryan, which did not win Best Picture. And then of course Spotlight winning Best Picture and having a Best Screenplay, which I'm just elated for. I'm so happy for that. I actually hope this causes us to get more straight dramas like that. Just an easygoing drama, not an easygoing subject, but you know what I mean. Like in terms of how the film is made and how subtle the direction and everything is, and because I love those kind of films. But let me see if this. But really, the most epic part of the whole evening was the fact that Mad Max Fury Road got 6 Oscars. We live in an age when a Mad Max film is winning Oscars. I said that on Twitter, and I think that is awesome. They deserved every Oscar that it got. Part of me was actually thinking, like, in the middle of it winning some of these Oscars, I was sitting there like, oh man, like my love for the film and the franchise started building in me again, and I started getting excited for it. And I was like, man, hopefully George Miller just picks up Best Director, and then it just sinks Best Picture, and then everybody's gonna be talking about it tomorrow. Winner of 8 Academy Awards, Mad Max Fury Road, including Best Picture. Another film that won that many, Schindler's List. Like it's up there. But of course, it was only wishful thinking. But it was the highest winner of the night, which is awesome. So, with all that aside, I have a big list of all these. Oh, I forgot to mention. Some of you guys might have saw on Facebook. Luke was actually originally going to join me on this stream, but I think I prematurely announced that because we were actually just thinking about doing a stream, and we just couldn't get our time straight. I know he's busy. The time zone difference is kind of jarring. Sometimes it's jarring, so sometimes it doesn't work out. But we're going to try to do a stream together in the future, which will be awesome because we haven't streamed together in a while. So if you guys have been sitting there waiting for Luke to appear, just going to go ahead and just spoil that for you. He doesn't appear. I was trying to think of a Star Wars Force Awakens joke to go along with that, but I couldn't do that. So, all right, well, I take it nobody's asked questions. I'm pretty sure because the question thing is not loading any questions, which is okay. I love accepting questions, but then I'm able to kind of go forward with my content as well. So first off, I'm going to be talking about the top 12 best pictures to me. My favorite top 12 best pictures between 1927 and 1959, and I'm going to be counting down by, starting with 12. All right. So, and like I said, these are my favorite. I'm not necessarily saying these are the best films. These are just my favorite. Can I just love a film? Do I have to love a film just because it's widely considered the best? No, I just love these films. And I just felt like I was just going on a little Adam the Woo style talk. Do I have to love these films? Sorry. Love Adam the Woo. I've been watching him a lot lately, so if I go on those little things and start talking like that, bear with me. All right, so number 12, we have Frank Capra's You Can't Take It With You from 1938. Sorry, I'm not like just leaning forward like this for no reason. I actually have my paper in front of me. So, yes, You Can't Take It With You from 1938, starring Jimmy Stewart. This film I love. I think it is one of the most entertaining films of the early half of cinema history. You get your comedy, you have your drama, you have your slapstick. It's really kind of all over the place in terms of that. And basically, it's like kind of a romantic comedy, and she's bringing Jimmy Stewart home to meet her family, who is completely wild, and basically it's the adventures of this family. They came out with a really great digibook of this film recently. I need to pick up the digibooks. I still have just the regular DVD, but you have some of the most hilarious segments in this film, and filled with great character actors as well. You could look back and just see, of course, there's some people that are in the catalog of Frank Capra, but it's just a great, fun film. Like, it's just over, and I was actually shocked when I first saw it. I was like, man, that was just a good film. I was like, It's almost like the Shop Around the Corner, like that style of a good, funny, heartwarming kind of film. And then I found out later it actually was one of the Best Picture winners of that year. So I thought that was awesome. Number 11. Oh, what is this? Another Frank Capra. 1934's It Happened One Night. This film is one that I just adore. I think it um, is so groundbreaking in terms of how romantic comedies are. And basically, it just shows two people that are just that that just meet and how they're trying to get through their situations together. Basically, um, Claudette Colbert, her life is basically she I keep forgetting she's like is she a princess? I keep forgetting what she is, but she is from royalty, I guess you could say. She's from high society, and she's trying to rebel against that kind of lifestyle because she doesn't want to marry who she wants to marry or who her family wants her to marry. And so she kind of escapes. Meanwhile, we have Clark Gable's character, who is a newspaper man who's trying to find that story so he could get his reputation back, or not his reputation, but that one good story to where he could stop being a laughing stock of the office, that kind of thing. And they're both traveling, and they both meet up, and they get stuck. It's almost like a planes, trains, and automobiles situation where they're both stuck because they need to get back to where they're going, and it's just their adventures through it. And you could they clash. The friction between them is hilarious, and how they go along this journey. Meanwhile, they're somewhat falling in love, and how the story goes. But I love this film too because they actually pass through my own city of Jacksonville, Florida, which is awesome because if you live in like New York and LA and stuff, of course your place of living is always in the movies. But when you live in Jacksonville, Florida, which isn't really in films a lot, I kind of latch on to any film that has my city in it. Hold on, let me finish this really quick. And I got a couple more sips left in there. All right, let's see what's next, shall we? Okay. Number 10 is 1929, 1930, 1929. It won for the 1929-1930 Oscar. Oh, my voice cracked. All Quiet on the Western Front. I love this film. When I first saw this film, I was a young lad growing up in this really, really happy world, and this film broke my life. It really destroyed me when I first saw it. I remember, I think it was on TCM? No, it was back when AMC was still almost like how TCM is now. And they were showing All Quiet on the Western Front, and I had to have been 8 or 9, and they were showing it. And I was like, okay, I've always seen, stills of this film from all my Oscar books. I saw stills of this film, like, throughout all the little film documentaries I had always watched. And I watched it, and I had never seen an anti-war movie with this much power before. Basically, this movie takes place during World War I, and we're following, this main character through the war. And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure, but he's actually on the German side of the war. So it's like we're sympathizing with the so-called enemy, from our point of view. I'm pretty sure that was the case. That's the one little detail I keep forgetting. But you follow him during the war, and it's such a emotional journey. You're like with this guy, and you're seeing these horrors of war. And I watch it, and I'm like, this film came out back then. They respected a film like this. Of course, it's based off the novel that was widely acclaimed, and they actually, teach it a lot in high schools and stuff. And I read it in middle school. They teach it to young adults and stuff or at least when I was in school. And so it's like filled with power. It's a powerful book, a powerful message. But I don't want to blow the ending for everybody who hasn't seen it. But I do remember when it ended, I was like this. Like I was just punched in the gut in terms of the message that it put. And I remember I couldn't go to. I started at like 10 o'clock at night, and I knew it was like 2.5 hours. And I was like, man, Dad, please let me stay up. Please let me stay up. I'm watching a movie for school. I was never allowed. I couldn't stay up late. So, but that one time I was able to. And after the movie, I was like, I can't go to sleep. And I think I was like in a daze the next day, probably like in a depression because the movie had affected me so much. Of course, the older I've gotten, it doesn't really depress me at all. It's still a powerful film, but I'm just kind of used to that message. But um, just a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant film. All right, let's see. Next up, we have 1945. This is at 9. 1945's The Lost Weekend, directed by Billy Wilder. I'm a huge Billy Wilder fan, and I love that he can make films, some that are just so dark, and he could really show the dark side of the human psyche and like just the dark side of mankind in general. And then sometimes he does this with humor, like humor, like Sunset Boulevard. There's some like tongue-in-cheek kind of bizarre kind of humor to it, but then you could go all the way to like films like The Apartment, Some Like It Hot, um, you know, just any of his films. I love all of his films. Double Indemnity, Stalag, 17. Did I really just screw up Stalag 17? Let me look. Yeah, 17. I don't know. Wow, I've never had a brain fart with that film before. But I've always been a huge Billy Wilder fan, and I've loved how he's been able to balance drama and comedy. Sometimes he goes a little bit, more towards the comedy and then less towards the drama, but there's always some of that in there. The Lost Weekend is pure drama. One of the first films to really show an alcoholic. It is a devastatingly powerful film. We have the lead actor. What's his name? I keep forgetting his name. He's from Dial M for Murder. What is his name? Why didn't I should have gotten a piece of paper out for this. I forget the dude's name, but let me see. Where's it at? You'll have to leave it. Deal with the fact that I forgot the dude's name, but Ray Milland, is that his name? I think that's his name. Don't think I pronounced the last name right, but that's his name. Growing up, I actually only knew him as the guy from Escape to Witch Mountain, the villain. So, but yeah, The Lost Weekend, basically, it's a guy who's just an alcoholic, and it opens with him really trying to change his life, and his friends and his girlfriend are really trying to help him out, and he's getting ready to basically give it all up. And through a series of circumstances, he ends up not giving the drinking up, and he goes on a binge. And he goes on this binge, and he's like flashing back to his parts of his life to how he got to where he is today. And it is for that time period, it's very realistic. It's very stark. It's very gritty. And I think it's a very important film. And I put it up there, I have a soft spot for films like that deal with those kind of issues, and I think it's up there with like films about addiction just as much or just as good as films like Clean and Sober, which I love. I love Clean and Sober. I think it's a brilliant film that I did not think got the love it deserved when it came out. But yeah, The Lost Weekend. It's definitely not a feel good film. So if you want to find an inspirational type film to watch, expecting to be smiling ear to ear the entire time, The Lost Weekend is not for you. You should probably watch a movie called The Great Weekend or something like that. Don't know why I just said that. Next up, we have at number 8, Laurence Olivier's Hamlet from 1948. Those of you who know me personally, I am a Shakespeare nut. I have everything that Shakespeare's ever written. I have everything that he's ever written. I have every individual book, and I have it all in one condensed, not one condensed, but one compilation book of everything that he's done. I have a ton of Shakespeare films that were adapted from Shakespeare that are just direct video from Shakespeare plays. I am a Shakespeare nut. I studied some Shakespeare in college and in high school. So, and I learned not how to speak it, but I learned how to understand Shakespearean, the Shakespearean, English, which can be very jarring if you're not really familiar with the language itself. So I'm one who could actually watch a Shakespearean play and understand what they say because I studied it. I took courses in college, but I also spent my own time trying to learn this stuff and learn how to interpret this stuff. And so Hamlet was actually my first, I guess you could say, my introduction into the cinematic world of Hamlet. I blind bought the Criterion when it came out back in the day. It came out a while back, and I always knew about this film because it was a Best Picture winner. So I always had a picture of Laurence Olivier in my head holding up, the skull and doing his soliloquy. And I'd always seen that, but I actually had never seen the film. And so I bought it, watched it, and wow, I was blown away. Definitely not the best interpretation of it. They leave a lot of stuff out, which in some way, shape, or form, looking back, can be forgiven or may not. There's some things I wish would have been different, but I think the film as a whole, as a film, not necessarily as an adaptation, as a film, is a masterpiece. I think the way it is filmed, it's like in like a low budget black and white. It's very noirish. And I think that's brilliant because like you're with somebody who may or may not be completely insane, and he's investigating his father's death. Meanwhile, he's orchestrating this whole entire revenge plot, and it's very noirish, but it's a period piece because it takes place, hundreds of years ago. And I think that's the strength of the film. Plus, Laurence Olivier is one of the greatest actors who ever lived. But the atmosphere and the cinematography for this film, to me, is the best part of the entire film. It is, in fact, hold on one second. Let me look. I think I got where's my Criterion of it? Can y'all see me? Yes, you can kind of see me. Where is it? It's kind of matches what this Criterion cover does, and I'm going to show it right here. But see, that's the look of the film. It's like that film noir period piece kind of look, and then the back really has. That's exactly like what the film looks like. It's filled with shadows. It's filled with not spooky, but misty hallways, and the camera work is amazing. You can tell there's some models, like miniature sets, that are actually used for some of the cameras, and it's just amazing. Yeah, and so here's another. There's a lot of these very dark blacks and really bright lights that stream across the actors' faces, and I think it's a brilliant film. Let me go put this back, and I really hope this gets a Blu-ray release on Criterion one day. I don't even think they have the rights to it anymore, other than the fact that they could still release this DVD. But oh man, I feel like I'm gonna sneeze. So yeah, Hamlet. I love the film so much. My favorite version of Hamlet, though, will probably be it used to be this until I saw the full-length version. Sorry, somebody's brakes were squeaking outside. Is the Kenneth Branagh version from, was it 96? Around that time period. And it is the full text and it is stunning. It is amazing. It's filled with cameos of actors from all over the place, and it's just, I love it. It's amazing. I have like multiple versions of Hamlet. Another one of my favorites is with David Tennant, and that was done a few years back, and it's amazing. Um, so yeah, number 8, Hamlet. Let me find number 7. I actually don't have it like on a list. I have it like a piece of paper of all the Best Picture winners, and I have it marked marked next to it. All right, number 7. We have 1935's Mutiny on the Bounty. This has Clark Gable and Charles Laughton in it, and not only is this one of the best picture winners, it is just one of the most entertaining and exhilarating film experiences I've ever had. I'm a huge fan of, the at sea kind of films and the adventure films, but I'm a huge fan of the Mutiny on the Bounty story. It's been adapted over the years. There's even the film Crimson Tide with Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington that takes place in a sub. It's actually loosely based off of the Mutiny on the Bounty story. So I've always loved it, and I've always been a fan of Clark Gable. Growing up, watching Gone with the Wind with my mom, I was always entertained by Clark Gable. So anything that he was in, I was always like, oh, that's Clark Gable's in this film. That must be great. And I remember the first time I saw Mutiny on the Bounty, I was younger, and I was like, man, not only is Clark Gable amazing in this film, I mean, he's amazing. He's actually kind of average compared to Charles Laughton as the Captain Bligh, who is just ruthless. And I've loved Charles Laughton for a long time. But this film I think is probably my favorite that he's ever done. I mean, ever done. It's hard for me to narrow down my favorite because he's one of my favorite actors. He is amazing in Advise and Consent as a South Carolina congressman, and I mean, he's literally great in everything he does. But my favorite will always be as Captain Bligh. And so basically, if you guys don't know, the Bounty is a ship that's carrying cargo, and it's basically like a trade ship. I'm pretty sure. I never really memorized like what they actually did, but they're going on I'm pretty sure it was 2-year journey out, and it's like to do trading and all that stuff. And Clark Gable is like the first mate. He's like the second man in charge other than captain. And Captain Bligh is a new captain who comes along, and everybody kind of does their own thing, and they have the easygoing kind of mentality. But Bligh comes along, and he is a straight and narrow. He does not. He's a disciplinarian. He is all about making sure that everybody obeys. And if they have the smallest infraction, they are basically publicly punished, whether it's lashed a bunch of times or what, or um, just climbing the ropes and staying at the top of the whatever they call it. I forgot what they call it, but staying even during like a storm, that kind of thing. He is ruthless. And as the film goes on and as the story goes on, he really starts to irk the crew. And really Clark Gable's character, who at first was very we must do what Captain Bligh says no matter how much we disagree with it. And so it starts a mutiny. And the tension between the crew and the captain really come to head, which kind of starts the remaining half of the film. And it's definitely one of the most entertaining films I've seen. One of the most thrilling films of the early half of cinema history. And it's just, spectacle, pure spectacle, and it's awesome. So I highly recommend you guys check that movie out. Next up, since I already mentioned it, is 1939's Gone with the Wind. This is a film I've watched my whole life with my mom, growing up, and I was always entertained by it. I think that Luke just said the stream is also love hearing you talk about all these classics. I should have appeared at the end of the stream, not said anything, and then it ends. That would have been really awesome. Then you guys would have had to waited for my next stream to see if Luke had anything to say. It sounds like something else, doesn't it, everybody? If you've seen Star Wars Episode 7, you may know what we're talking about. Ugh. Ugh. The remaining thing of coffee was very cold. But, yeah, Gone with the Wind. I remember my mom got, like, the big VHS set that was, like, one of the special sets, and it was, like, really, really big. It was, like, an anniversary set, and I remember watching it with her, and that was, like, the first time I've seen an epic of that length, and I remember sitting with her being like, it was before she introduced me to The Godfather. So I was blown away by the film. I thought, I didn't really, of course, some of the aspects of the film, which are really kind of controversial to this day, it didn't hit me when I was a kid. I didn't really understand um, some of the social issues that were going on. All I knew is that it was an epic film, and it was kind of a off and on romance, but it had like a historical perspective with it too. Um, but I love Gone with the Wind. Sorry, my voice is cracking. Like I said, I haven't gotten my voice back from kind of the pollen overexposure yesterday. Um, but yeah, I love Gone with the Wind. I think it is a beautiful film. I do. I mean, it's one of my favorites, but it's one of those things where I don't think it's a perfect film. I think it's flawed, and I will go ahead and say, while it is one of my favorite Best Picture winners and one of the greatest films ever made, um, it is flawed. It's your perfect example of a film that's widely considered like a ultimate masterpiece that actually has flaws. To me, I think the second half of the film, some of the deaths of certain characters, even though it takes place over a certain period of time, I feel like it's like boom, dead, you know, and it's not. I think there's some. I don't know if the novel's like that, but I think that there's some. It really jumps to tragedy, kind of a little bit quickly, and but then again, it's part of how films were then. It adds to the melodrama, I guess you could say. But I think it is a great film. I think it's not. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's great, and it was definitely an early exposure to like the cinematic experience. Like for me, like I'm so glad my mom is a film buff because she was able to expose me to all these kind of films. I don't think I would have been into classic films as much if it was for her. Um, and of course, my dad. My dad, like I've said in the streams before, um, my dad is really the one who was really got me into like a lot of the military's war films and stuff like that. So um, I have vivid early memories of waking up in the middle of the night and walking out and seeing my parents watch Casablanca, and I finished it with them watching the Sands of Iwo Jima. I remember telling you guys um, if you saw my Sands of Iwo Jima video, you would have saw that, or you would have seen that I talked about how I vividly remember downstairs, or not downstairs. I didn't have stairs. I have stairs now, which is why I said it. Going from my bedroom to the living room, going from my bedroom in the middle of the night to the living room, and my parents were watching a movie, and I remember walking in, and I had to have been like 5. I was so young, I didn't know who John Wayne was, and I walked into the room, and I had a vivid memory of a military officer, walking into a tent saying, "I'm Sergeant Stryker," and I don't know why that image stuck with me. And it wasn't until years later when I was into getting back into film and I watched Sands of Iwo Jima, that scene came up where John Wayne walked into the tent and said, the name Stryker, Sergeant Stryker. I was like, holy shit. Like basically I was like, what? Like this is that film. This movie, like this scene really stuck with me for years when I was a kid. I didn't know who all these people. The only actor I knew of when I was a kid was Michael Keaton. Like I said, I've watched his stuff most of my life. But when that happened, I was like, whoa, talk about like, and that was like one of the first big kind of experiences like that for me anyways. um So of course I was into classic films because of that. But I'm just so glad that I had parents that really kind of helped get me into classic film before a lot of new stuff. I mean, I was always into most of my life. If I'm watching a movie nowadays, in most of my life, it's always been 80% of the movies that I watch are more than likely films that came out at least 20 years before I was born. I don't know. It's just how I've always been, um, which is why sometimes it takes me so long to see certain movies in cinema these days, because I spend most of my time revisiting or watching new films I hadn't seen that were like 60 years old. I've always been more about classic cinema than new cinema for some reason. All right, we are now at number 5. Man, we're only in the first half at this point. That's okay. Number 5, we have Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca, 1940. Um, the only time an Alfred Hitchcock film won Best Picture. I think it was definitely deserved in this case. We have a story that is very I would say this movie is kind of, in the story, is kind of a gothic style romance, but not really a romance and like a melodramatic style romance. Like, it really has I get confused sometimes when I'm explaining that kind of, a woman falls in love with a man played by Laurence Olivier, and he is loaded. He is rich. He has a big house, mansion, and Joan Fontaine is his wife, and she comes to his house, and everybody there doesn't really like her because all they do is keep comparing her to Laurence Olivier's first wife, her whose name is Rebecca, and basically the tension between Joan Fontaine and everybody else at the house, and the fact that it's filmed in a gothic noirish kind of way. It's almost like a it's almost almost like a haunted house kind of feel too, because you could definitely tell that there is a spirit of Rebecca in the house in some way, shape, or form. And Joan Fontaine is so conflicted and so torn over this. Did her husband kill Rebecca? There's all these mysteries surrounding Rebecca's death and how the film handles it. And of course, being Hitchcock, it has a great twist, and the film is just amazing. I love it, love it, love it. I think I want to get a shirt one day that says "I love it, love it, love it." I seem to do that a lot. I was rewatching a video I did a couple of years ago, and I was like, if I really love something, I love it, love it, love it, love it. I don't know. So yeah, number 5 is Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca. Let's see if I have anything else. Well, yeah, of course I do, because that's number 5. All right, where's number 4? Where is number 4? All right, number 4, we have 1959's Ben-Hur, which is a film. I mean, when I think of epic film, there are 3 films I think of: Ben-Hur, The Ten Commandments, and Lawrence of Arabia. Those are epic films to me. They stand for everything that an epic film does. And then you have a lot of biblical epics, and I think Ben-Hur and Ten Commandments knock it out of the park 100%. Ben-Hur is a film that I've always loved. I grew up watching it. I grew up. I mean, I guess I couldn't. I shouldn't say I grew up watching it in whole. I didn't watch a 4-hour movie in one sitting. When I was a kid, I would watch just different segments of it. One day would be, um, you know, when he's rowing the ship. The next day, I would watch it, and it'd be the chariot race. The next day, I would watch it would be when Christ is on the cross. And when I got older, I watched it from beginning to end. I read the novel that the movie's based on, and I loved everything about the whole story, the whole meaning of it, the epicness to it, but really the fact that it's a revenge tale, and but it doesn't just stop there. It's really about how revenge, once you finally get it, it doesn't really mean anything. It's like the power for forgiveness and moving on and not latching onto that hatred and bitterness. And It's an epic film that deals with very intimate and very emotional things. Everybody who has a beating heart has had a feeling of somebody that did them wrong, like, ugh, like this person, man. Like, you don't really wish they died, but you like wish you could get them back, or they'll get what's coming to them. That kind of a feel. And this film, it really approaches that, and it does the same thing that one of my favorite books, The Count of Monte Cristo. I read the full book before I saw any movie. I read the book before I saw the movie. It's another film that deals with that kind of thing about revenge, but does revenge really mean you're going to be happy at the end of it? That kind of a thing. And so I've always been drawn to those kind of revenge kind of stories, and I don't like how I like how like that's the route it goes, because I don't like movies that, you know, show somebody getting revenge and then at the end of it they're like really happy that they finally got revenge, because I think in real life the human psyche would be like, you know, questioning that whole thing, like, was it worth it? That kind of a thing. So yes, Ben-Hur at number 4. Number 3 is a film that I love and is a huge part of my childhood as well. It is The Bridge on the River Kwai from 1957. This film, for so many years, was always that war film with Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's how before I'd seen it, that's what I thought of the film. And I remember vividly what actually introduced me to this film. I had seen it. I found out later I had seen it when I was a kid, but I didn't really know what it was, and I didn't really pay attention to it as much. But I remember back in like 1997, that was when AFI released the 100 Years 100 Movies list, and they had the TV special. And I remember watching the TV special and seeing that I've now seen 2 films that on your watch list that you own on Blu-ray that have now shot up on your watch list: The Lost Weekend and All Quiet on the Western Front. Oh yeah, you do have The Lost Weekend, don't you? Do you have the Luke, when you hear this, because I know there's a delay, do you have the Masters of Cinema Lost Weekend? I'm pretty sure I didn't know if that was part of the Masters of Cinema, but yeah. Yeah, and like I said, Alec Guinness really drew me to Bridge on the River Kwai as well. But when I saw this film on the AFI special, and I was like, I have to see it. And I remember going to Blockbuster, and it was back before they had it on one cassette tape, and it was 2 cassette tapes on this film. And I remember when I first rented it, something was off, because the cassette tape itself. Oh, you have the Masters of Cinema Steelbook of The Lost Weekend. That's awesome. Something was off with this, because the 2 tapes that were on Bridge over the River Kwai back at Blockbuster they were different. They had different labels, and so I was like, oh man, is this? And so the first tape, it ended at a certain place, and then I would put in the second tape, and it started like 20 minutes before the other tape ended. So it was kind of off, but it did, that was the experience of renting cassette tapes from video, like rental stores. That's what you put up with sometimes. But the film itself is just a pure masterpiece. It's epic, but it's intimate at the same time. It really, Alec Guinness is, while he is a protagonist, at times you feel like maybe does he have different motives? Is he an antagonist? Is he, because there are times when you're like, what the heck is he doing? Because it's basically about, in Japan, it's not in Japan, but they're in a Japanese prisoner of war camp during World War II, and I'm pretty sure it's like in Burma, Myanmar now, but Burma back then, and they're in a camp in the middle of the woods, and in the middle of the woods, that puts it lightly. It's in the middle of the jungle. That's just like miles and miles and miles and miles and miles from anything, away from all civilization. And they actually, Colonel Saito, or Saito, the leader of the camp, he has a mission that he has orders to build a bridge to help connect, supply lines within, the army and all that kind of stuff that really help, the Empire of Japan at the time. And they've really he's really said to all these prisoners, you're going to build this bridge. And so then we have, Alec Guinness and his crew show up at the POW camp. And Alec Guinness is really all about principle. He's a man of principle. He's all about the Geneva Code, the Geneva Convention, and my officers are not going to work. And he's all about the book. And it ends up being like a friction between him and Colonel Saito, or whatever. I'm just going to call him Colonel Saito. And it's enthralling to watch because the first segment of the film is really just a battle of their egos. And meanwhile, you have William Holden, who's one of my all-time favorite actors. I think he's just he screams charisma, like in terms of, sometimes I think back if I was gonna have a drink with an actor, what actor would I just have a drink with at a bar? It would be William Holden, because I would just want to sit there and listen to his stories. He just seems like, cool guy to have a drink with. But he's a prisoner who at this point does not consider himself at all a soldier. He's just a slave, and he says it himself. He's like, I'm just a working slave. That's all I am. And he has some mystery. I'm not going to blow it, but he has some mystery behind him as well. So you have like these three characters that are just have completely different motives, and it's all at the end result, it's all about building this bridge. And so William Holden actually escapes towards the beginning of the film, and later is recruited to blow up the bridge, to go back and blow it up with commandos. And so you follow all these stories. I didn't saying that William Holden goes and blows up this bridge or something like that is kind of, it's not a spoiler because the back of the box says it. That's like one of the biggest, plot synopsis for this film. And because in reality, it's not really about the bridge. It's about where each of these men are, like what they stand for. And I, of course, have talked about more, some of these films more than other films, but it is just a brilliant, brilliant film. And it's another one of those films that scream epic. And so, yes, number 3, The Bridge on the River Kwai. All right. Let's find number 2. Number 2 is 1943's Casablanca. Like I've said before, this film also has a personal connection with me, and how, I love the film in general. I think it is a bittersweet love story, but I don't even really consider it that. I think it's a film about redemption, and that's what I latch on to the most. There's so many details in this film that are so emotional and so beautiful to me. I think we've all had those times in our lives where we've had a connection with somebody and it just didn't work out. Like it doesn't really have to be a relationship like in Bergman and, Bogart's sense in the film, but there's been situations in your life to where it's almost like you had these experiences in the past and then you meet up again and you realize that, yeah, you might still care for each other. You might still be, friends or whatever, but it's better almost to leave the past there, like in the movie, like this, because I mean, that's the whole line. Like, we'll always have Paris. Like, I think we've all had those kind of experiences with people. And I think that's what resonates in this film is somewhat bittersweet, but it's not really about the romance between the two. It's how each of the characters grow and how they, at the beginning of the movie, Rick, played by, Humphrey Bogart, is the most cynical person, closed off person you could possibly think of. He is Humphrey Bogart's, Sam Spade from, Maltese Falcon. He is cold, but he's a good guy, but he's cold and he doesn't connect with people. And you learn why, and you learn about this romance with Bergman. And when she shows up, it really is a conflict of interest and almost like a conscience thing for him, and he ends up, he grows from the situation, and it's almost like they both redeem themselves in some way, shape, or form, and they end up being better people for it. But there's one scene in this film that really chokes me up every single time I watch it, and it's the scene where Bergman's husband and her are in the bar, and he's like a huge resistance fighter, to the Nazis. He's a huge hero to the resistance to the Nazi Empire, and he's like on a way of escaping, and that's why they're in Casablanca. They're trying to get transit letters to get out and escape into another country, and so they're there. And Casablanca is in the process of they're kind of neutral, and so you have some like French forces there, but then you also have some Nazis there that are they're dropping clues that they're about to grab hold of this town, and it's their way or no way. So there's a mixture of it, and there's a scene where they're in Rick's place, and the Nazi officers start singing all these like German pride songs, basically. I forget the name of the song, but they start singing it, and so everybody in the crowd, some people join in because some people in the room probably are pro Nazis, but then what's his name? What is Bergman's husband's name? I forget his name, but he stands up, grabs the mic, and I don't think he grabs the mic, but he starts singing, basically a beloved pro-France song, and it is powerful. But while it is powerful and it overcomes, the Germans, the Nazi Empire's music and the officers' music, that's powerful. But there is a scene within that scene where at the beginning of the movie, Rick has a girlfriend that you could tell he probably just kind of is just with her just to be with her, and she is so torn. He ends up. Sorry, I'm having like a sinus fit in the middle of this. She's drunk. He basically throws her to the side and says, get her home. She just loves him, but I don't know if she, he loves her back, that kind of situation. And she's just torn up about it. And she's like yelling at him and stuff. And basically he rejects her. And you see her throughout the beginning of the movie with, some of the Germans, which is really interesting because she was originally with Rick. And, because of their relationship, she kind of threw it all. She threw herself away for these Nazi officers who were, reviled in that town, and they're just, that's a huge thing for her to do that. So basically, that's her saying, "I'm done with my past life. I'm done with everything I stood for. I'm done trying to," she's done with her life, and you could tell because she's just, she's desperate. It's her last resort. In the middle of, I think it's Laszlo. I think that's Bergman's husband's name. Now that I think about it, in the middle of him singing, you see her sitting with the, the German officers. And hold on one second. I need to turn off the audio for 1 second because I am going to have to. All right, thank you for letting me blow my nose. But and at this very moment when the singing's going on, this woman, torn and everything, she is done. She's at her wit's end. She is desperate. The music, when they start singing this, I keep forgetting the name of the song, but the basically the French national anthem, basically, she stands up in the middle of these German officers. She stands up and starts singing it, and the tears that are coming down her face and the passion that's in her face for her country, it's basically like just revived her emotionally, and physically, everything. And that's what this film is about. It's about all these little details, and that's why I love it so much. Yes, it's people say, it is a romance, but I don't even I consider it a drama, an espionage type movie, a war film. I just think it's an overall masterpiece. And I think to just say it's a classic romance really does not do it justice, because it's so much more than that. I mean, so like I'm a sucker for films that deal with like redemption, and that scene with the woman is just so powerful to me. All right, so next up we have number one. We have 1954's On the Waterfront, which is a film that's been one of my favorite films of all time for years. This is a powerful film to me. It is inspiring. Sometimes I think we've all been in situations where we probably maybe we're not like we were surrounding ourselves with people that were not in our best interest, but they said they were, and we had to stand up for what was right. And that's what this film is about. We have Marlon Brando's character, who's an ex-boxer, who works with the organized crime, who kind of like works with his brother and his old, I guess you could say almost like a father figure in his life. Basically, Lee J. Cobb is in charge of a local, what is it, union that controls all the work with the waterfront. And his brother, or Marlon Brando's brother, played by oh my gosh, I am not gonna uh, Rod Steiger. I cannot believe I blanked on his name. Rod Steiger plays like kind of like his Johnny Friendly, who's Lee J. Cobb's character's name. He's basically Johnny Friendly's assistant, and he's like his number one guy. Almost kind of like Jack Napier in Batman. You are my number one guy. Like that's the same kind of situation. And so Marlon Brando is a washed up boxer, and he's washed up because he was told to throw a fight to benefit Johnny Friendly during a bet. And so at this point, he considers himself a bum, a worthless piece of crap. Basically, he's the lowest of the low. And he's influenced by his brother and Johnny Johnny Friendly. And he is just at a place in his life where he's just, just a bum. And the movie opens up with him setting somebody up on the waterfront just so, because they were going to rat to the crime commission about the illegal activity that's going on at the waterfront. And the movie opens up with Brando doing a favor for Johnny Friendly and his brother to get somebody up on a roof. And he's like, "Hey man, I'm gonna come up and we'll talk. I got one of your birds, and go. I'll meet you at the top of your roof." Meanwhile, Brando did not know that getting the guy up to the roof was going to result in the fact that there was some gangsters up there that were going to throw him off the roof. He thought they were just going to talk to him, and it was somebody that Brando was friends with. And so the movie starts out with him having a conflicted conscience, and he knows what the right thing to do is, and he just can't fathom ratting on his brother, ratting on people that have been family to him. And he meets a woman named Edie, and she is the guy at the beginning, the one that Brando had to go to the roof to where he was, going to get thrown off. It's his sister, and he falls in love with her, and he only really follows her to begin with, just to find out, does she know anything? Does she know any information? And so they fall in love, and basically Brando is just at a complete conflicted conscience. He doesn't know who to trust. He doesn't know anything, and basically it's his mind trying to come up with the strength to stand up against everything that's bad. And it is powerful storytelling. I just love the film so much. I'm a huge fan of Brando, of course. I'm also a huge fan of Elia Kazan, the director of the film. I think he is one of the greatest directors in terms of method acting and that whole method acting, actor studio school. I think he is one of the best directors to come out of that whole era. And his films are always, all of his films are powerful to me. I love Elia Kazan, and this film is, I guess you could say, this film came out near the time after Elia Kazan had actually named names in the, the communist witch hunt of the 50s during that time period in Hollywood. He named names, and he was basically looked at like he was a traitor. And even Marlon Brando thought of him in that way. Like he was like, I don't think highly of him anymore, that kind of thing. But Brando did the film. There was just some conflict behind the scenes, but a lot of people took On the Waterfront as Kazan's answer to his critics in regards to naming names in front of the Un-American committee. And I don't know, I've always loved it. This is a film that I could watch, and I watch it sometimes if I'm in a very discouraged place. I could watch this, and it really gives me the strength to really stand up and go forward in what I know is the right thing to do. I just think and it's one of the greatest acted films. Brando is amazing in it, but somebody that doesn't really get a lot of talk now and like in hindsight about it is gosh, I'm like having a brain fart with everybody. Hold on. Carl Malden's character, that's who it is, as the priest of the Waterfront, who is kind of the one who's instigating this whole thing of making thanks, Luke. I'm a huge fan of Total Recall, the remake, because I like Kate Beckinsale and I like bitches. That's hilarious. It's an inside joke for those of you who don't know what that actually means, but I've actually never seen the remake of Total Recall, so I wanted to though. So yeah, Carl Malden and as the priest in On the Waterfront is, to me, other than Brando, the standout performance in the entire film. Ava Marie Saint is amazing as well in her film debut, which she won an Oscar for. So yeah, that is my top 12 favorite Best Pictures from the late 20s to 1959 or so. Man, I am exhausted from talking, but should I keep going? Should I go ahead and do the next 12? If anybody has the question part open, tell me in the question parts, because I think I want to keep going. Let me see. Some of these films in the next part I'm not going to go into as much because I, of course, love it, or because of yeah. You know what? I'm going to go anyways. Let's do this. Now I'm going to be talking about the Best Pictures, my top 12 favorite Best Pictures from 1960 to present. And this is the area where a lot of my favorite films of all time come into play. So you guys probably already know what my top 3 is, but it's okay. It's still fun to go through it. Number 12 is actually a tie. Number 12 is a tie between Rocky from 1976 and Schindler's List from 1993 is when, I think, when Schindler's List came out. Let me see. It's either 93 or 94. I'm pretty sure it was 93. Yes. Rocky is just an all-around, to even say it's a sports film does not do it enough credit. It is a masterpiece of drama. Like, in terms of the human spirit and persevering through chances that you never would have had to. I mean, it's just amazing, and the acting across the board is phenomenal. And I know a lot of people were shocked. The year that this film came out, that is the same year that Network, which is a masterpiece, All the President's Men, and just amazing films were also nominated for Best Picture, and Rocky won. It was almost like in the underdog in that category too, and it won. Schindler's List is another film that I love. I grew up. My mom let me watch it when I was growing up. Let me watch it, and she sat there with me before I was even old enough to watch it. And because she knew I was obsessed with like history, And so she let me watch it, but she sat there with me and described with me every single um, thing about it. So I didn't go into it thinking, man, this movie's violent. This is a violent movie. Um, I went into it with the understanding of the history and the meaning and why all the stuff is going on. And so um, that's how you, to me, that's how you expose a child or a young kid to an important film like that. You sit with them and you talk to them about it. That's how all the horror things that are on. That is how you talk with somebody, or you don't let a kid go watch a movie like that and not have any explanation of it. So I've always loved Schindler's List. The new Blu-ray that came out is just stunning. But what can I say about Schindler's List that has not been said before? It's just a great film. So let's find number 11. Oh man. Number 11 is 1997's Titanic. This is a period in time in history that I was just obsessed with as a kid. I had so many books on the Titanic. I had a big puzzle of the Titanic. Remember when Puzz 3D was popular, where they had those 3D puzzles? I had a Titanic version of that. I had documentaries that Orson Welles narrated. Every TV special that I recorded off of VHS. I was the only third grader at the time that you could find out exact times and dates for what happened on the Titanic. I just was obsessed with the Titanic and really that area of history as well. But I was really excited when the film came out, and I've just loved it ever since. I did not participate in that whole. Remember when it became cool to hate Titanic, like after it won all the Oscars and stuff, and everybody had seen it? Remember when it became cool to hate it? Yeah, I never fell in that crowd. I always loved it, and I still love it to this day. So, and I think it well deserved all the Oscars that it won. And yeah, it's the love story of our times, I guess you could say, especially if you grew up during that period. That's our almost like our Casablanca, that kind of thing. So what number was that? All right, so now we're at 10. Number 10, we have 1994's Forrest Gump. There's really not a bunch to say about that film that hasn't been said. It's just 100% pure entertainment, amazing filmmaking, some enthralling human drama in there, and just everything about Forrest Gump. I'm preaching to the choir when I talk about Forrest Gump because everybody knows how great of a film it is. And if you're watching this video, I'm sure you'll love it as well. So it's not like I have to kind of, persuade people that hate it to love it. If you don't like Forrest Gump, leave me a comment down below and tell me why you don't like it. Give me a good answer. Don't just say because it sucks. Give me a reason why you don't like Forrest Gump if you don't like it. All right, let's see. Number 9. Number 9, we have The Lord of the Rings: Return of the King, which was a big shocker of a Best Picture, winner. Because it won 11 Oscars, and that hadn't been done since Titanic. So it was a huge deal. I love it because, some people, of course, say that, Fellowship of the Ring may be a better movie. I don't say that, that I don't agree with that 100%. But in some aspects, it is a better movie in terms of, just everything. But I consider all three of the films one continuous story. So I consider the Return of the King Oscar an Oscar for the Lord of the Rings trilogy for Best Picture. I think of all three of them as a complete Best Picture winner. I don't look at Return of the King and go, this is the superior one because this one won Best Picture. No, I just look at it as it's the Best Picture and it's collective with all three films. And I personally think that's what the Academy probably had in mind too. Because you can't just say it's a career Oscar. They only did it because the first two films. No, I just consider it the story had ended and it was a collective story, and that's why they were awarding it. It'd be weird to give The Fellowship of the Ring or even the Two Towers Best Picture, only the Two Towers Best Picture and have the other two not. Like, I think it makes sense to have it at the end. But not everybody would agree with me. Next up, we have 2007's No Country for Old Men. I know. I'm pretty sure that this was the year that There Will Be Blood came out. I'm pretty sure that was the year it came out, which I think is one of the best films of the decade. Of that decade, it's one of my all-time favorite films. But No Country for Old Men, I think, was a very well-deserved Best Picture because of. I think it's the Coen Brothers at their best. Fargo is probably like basically my second favorite Coen Brothers film, but No Country for Old Men has everything that I love about a film, and it has a great story. It has tension, in terms of a suspenseful story, and it has very deep meaning behind it. A very deep meaning about how there's always going to be bad and evil in this world, and it's hard for people to stop it, and that's basically what the gist of the movie is about. Some people think the movie just ends and like it doesn't have any kind of climax or anything like that. It just ends. Even when I first saw it, I knew that the movie was about Tommy Lee Jones's character, and when you hear and see his journey, I mean, throughout the entire film, even though he's not a main character. Like, he is a main character, but he's not the absolute main character. There's really three main characters. But the movie is about him and his beliefs. Yeah, you follow, James, not James Brolin, Josh Brolin. I kept thinking of his dad, but you follow him for a lot of the film, and you follow, Chigurh, played by Javier Bardem. You follow him, but really the backbone and the emotion of the film and the meaning behind the film is really about what's going on in the mind of Tommy Lee Jones's character, where he's a sheriff trying to do good, and he's trying to, save the world from basically evil by, investigating these crimes and all this kind of stuff. And so when you think of it in that way, the movie concludes brilliantly, and I love it. I loved it from the start. I remember when the film stopped, walking out of the theater, some people were like, "Oh, it just ended." But then there was a couple people I heard that were like, "No, no, 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 no. You don't. Did you read the book? Like that is what the movie was about. Was what Tommy Lee Jones was saying the whole time, and you have to kind of read into it. It's not going to be spoon fed to you." And I read the book as well, and the book is just amazing. So yeah, No Country for Old Men. Number 7, 2006 is The Departed, Martin Scorsese. When The Departed came out, it was one of the first films that me and my wife went and saw as friends. We were like, in fact, the first film that we went together to see was Clerks 2. She hadn't seen the first one, so like, she's a winner if you could get her to go to Clerks 2. That's, that was the kind of, the gist I got. But the next film that we went together to see, in fact, I think it was after we started dating back in 2006, but it was, wow, we've been together for 10 years. Wow. Let me see. I heard a ding. Hold on one second. Just making sure everything's okay. Yeah, so we went to The Departed. Theater was packed. We went opening weekend. Theater was packed, and it was crazy. The audience's reaction to this film was just so entertaining. There's a big part in the film that everybody who watches the film knows, and by this point we all know there's a big part in the film where something very unexpected happens, and everybody in the crowd, I mean, I remember when this certain thing happens, everybody in the crowd was like, shit, like everybody, all the girls went, oh, and all the guys went, screamed out a cuss word of some kind, and the theater was packed. It was just that was an entertaining film experience, and I was like, yes, Martin Scorsese is back with a Boston crime film. Of course, this film inspired a bunch of Boston crime films to come. It was just, it was amazing. But from the second I walked out, I was like, that is my best picture of the year. And I didn't expect it to win Best Picture. I did not expect it to win Best Picture. I was hoping that Martin Scorsese would get an Oscar for Best Directing, but that is one of the times where I really, promoted a film, to my friends and family, saying that is the best picture of the year, and it actually followed through. And when it happened this year with Spotlight, I didn't really talk about it as much on social media, but people that close to me, my wife, my family, some of my friends, they all know that I was really pushing that movie. And so, yeah, The Departed, I love it. And I love it to this day. All right, let's see what's next. What's next? What's next? Throw me a freaking bone here, Austin Powers. Okay, I'm starting to get loopy. I've been talking for so long. I wonder how long this stream's been going. Number 6 is a film that I've just loved my entire life, and it is Patton from 1970. And those of you who have watched one of my recent videos about war films, you will know that you would already know that Patton is one of the films that really drove me into loving films. That seeing that, The Bridge Too Far, and The Longest Day within a closed period of time that really catapulted me into loving film. I love Patton. I love everything about the film. I think it is a brilliant biography, but yet at the same time, it's a brilliant portrait of a man through a war, I guess you could say, who is very unconventional compared to some of the other leaders of the war during the time period. He was very unconventional, and it really did not benefit him in a lot of ways, but it's made him a legend to this day. And from a filmmaking standpoint, Franklin J. Schaffner did a phenomenal job, and he deserved the Oscar, for Best Director. Francis Ford Coppola wrote the screenplay, and he was actually he tells this story on a lot of the Godfather special features where he was talking about how during the Godfather he was scared of being fired the entire time during the Godfather, and especially when he opened up the Godfather with the scene of Bonacera talking about his daughter, and it's just a close up of the man's face, and it pulls back, and it's just dark, and you realize you're in an office. Like, you don't open a movie like that, and everybody says that Coppola was actually almost fired alone for that scene. And he went to work every day on The Godfather thinking that was his last day. Al Pacino was the same way. The studio just did not. They were about to pull the plug on all of them, and so, of course, The Godfather went on to win Best Picture. Hint, hint for the rest of the video. But Francis Ford Coppola wrote the screenplay for Patton, and Patton opens up with the now famous scene of Patton, giving a speech to his troops. It's filmed in a way of making it seem like he's giving a speech to the audience in front of the huge American flag, which is a huge iconic scene now. But he wrote the script, and the studio was like, you can't open a film like that. You can't open a film like that. It does not make sense. And he says that because of that, he was fired from production on the film, and they took his screenplay and they did film it. Later, he won an Oscar, and he says, he tells people all the time, do what you love to do. If you're not breaking the rules, if you're not causing controversy, that means he says, if you're doing all that, it means you're doing something right. Because he said he got fired from Patton because of his script with opening like that. And he said he almost got fired from The Godfather for doing something different. He said those are the things that eventually you're given Oscars for. So I thought that was, a pretty cool story. And I always get a kick of every time I hear him tell it. So, yeah, I love Patton. All right, let's go to number 5. Woohoo! Come on, number 5. All right, number 5, we have Lawrence of Arabia. This is a film that I've talked about nonstop. I think it is epic in the grandest sense, and it is just a powerful epic because it's not only your typical epic film. You're dealing with a character that's very, very flawed, and a very he has a very big dark side to him, and you could see it leaking throughout the entire film. And he's kind of not with it all in his brain. He has like there's that scene where he talks about how he killed somebody and he enjoyed doing it, and so he's a very you know flawed and conflicted character, which makes the story even more amazing. So I've talked about that film a lot, so I'm gonna go ahead and just move on. So now we're getting into the films that I love the most, and now we're actually kind of getting into my top 10 favorite films of all time. Not number 4. It is one of my top favorite films of all time, but we're getting close. Number 4 is 1978's The Deer Hunter, which when I first saw it, I was like, man, this film is like, I've always had a thing for slow moving films. Like I've never had an issue with it. I don't know why, but I remember going, man, this movie is really slow. I didn't not like it, but I was like, it's a slow moving film. And then, because when I first watched it, I actually blind bought it on VHS from some used hole in the wall video rental store, and I was blown away by the cover. Like it was a beautiful looking cover to the movie, and I remember watching the film thinking, man, this wedding lasts forever. And then like during the first half, I was like, okay, where is this movie going? And I was really kind of confused because I was like, I mean, it's halfway through and it's epic, but it's not really picking up. Like I enjoyed it, but it wasn't really picking up like I was used to with long epic films. But by the end of it, it made perfect sense. It wasn't about the plot. It wasn't about having some narrative string you along. It was about the characters. It was about this town. It was about this lifestyle that these guys were used to. Then they get shipped off to war. It destroys everything. They go back to the town. It is not the same. Their lives have been changed from war and the scars of war. And so the reason why it's such a slow moving film is because you're supposed to feel like you're with them in this town, experiencing life the way they've experienced it, their daily rituals, their wedding, their being with them through the happy times and the low times, going with them to war, seeing them get separated, coming back and seeing where these characters are now. And as a viewer, you're watching it with these characters when they go back to their town, and you feel like, even as a viewer, your mind's still in the Vietnam segments. Your mind is still with what happened to these characters. And they're back at this familiar town that we're used to seeing as viewers, but yet we have nostalgia for how it was at the beginning of the movie. That is the key to understanding this movie. That is why this film is so powerful, because it's about experiencing these characters' lives, how they experience it. It's not about finding a hero, latching onto him, and seeing him dominate the world. It is about experiencing what these guys went through by experiencing how their life was before, during, and after the war. And it gets me every single time. This is one of those films at the end of the movie, I could just bawl like a baby. I mean, it's such a powerful, devastatingly powerful film. That's the easiest way to explain it. Number 3 is 1977's Annie Hall, which behind the Godfather films and Taxi Driver is my favorite film of all time. The huge Star Wars fan that I am, yes, I love Star Wars, but I have always said that I believe Annie Hall was deserving of Best Picture because of the script, the acting, but then just the filmmaking, aspects behind it. I would definitely put Star Wars and Annie Hall in terms. I mean, I think Annie Hall just barely nudged out Star Wars, in my opinion. I've talked about Annie Hall all throughout my YouTube life, but I love every single aspect of the film. I think it's what it says about relationships is amazing. I said it recently. I forgot when I said it, It was either in a Saturday Night Insanity episode with Zarin Isaac or something, or just in a hangout with like Skin Slip and Styled Man and Sean. But I've said that, you know, there's the quote in the film about how, you know, about like what he says about relationships, about how they're painful, um, they're painful. You just get your heart ripped out sometimes, and it just talks about how these little things that you have in a relationship and why it doesn't make sense. And then he's like, but it's like, dang it. Let me find it. Let me find it. Hold on one second. Annie Hall. Hold on one second. I want to say this quote. I think it's okay. The where he says, I thought of that old joke, you know, this guy, he goes to the psychiatrist and says, Doc, my brother's crazy. He thinks he's a chicken. And the doctor says, well, why don't you turn him in? And the guy says, well, I would, but I need the eggs. And he says, well, I guess that's pretty much how I feel about relationships. You know, they're totally irrational. They're crazy. They're absurd. But I guess we keep going through them because most of us need the eggs. And that says so much about what the film is about. And I think it hits home. And that's just on the script, the script of the film. And that's not even talking about the film includes, you know, subtitles on the screen about what the people are thinking on the inside. It has you know, has animation in it. It has a bunch of different things in this film, and I just think it's amazing. So, last but not least, my top 2 favorite Best Pictures, of course, are my favorite films of all time: The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2. One from 1972 and the other from 1974. They're just my favorite films of all time, and I think that The Godfather is one of the greatest American films ever made, and I think that The Godfather Part 2, I don't even really consider it a sequel as much as I do a companion. Like, I can't, just to say it's a sequel completely takes away from the fact that how amazing the film is and how it really builds on what made The Godfather amazing, and it brings it even more into an epic level. So, oh man, Windows 10 is starting to give me stupid updates. I should turn those notifications off. But yes, The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2, films that I've loved my entire life and have been The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2 have been my favorite films of all time since elementary school. And I really don't see it changing because I think that, you know, you connect with a film that much, it will always be your favorite. I think it's entertaining. It's thrilling. I have fun with it. I could watch it nonstop. In fact, sometimes I just turn on the TV and The Godfather's on and I just leave it on. And I think, you know, they were well deserving of their Best Picture Oscars. So, but anyways, guys, thank you so much for for watching the stream. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I didn't bore you too much. I had a lot of fun with it. What time is it? Damn, it's 12 o'clock, pretty much. 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and this has been going on for close to 2 hours. That's crazy. Has it been close to 2 hours? Probably, yeah. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. What are some Best Picture winners that you love down below? What are your thoughts on this year's Oscars? So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. See ya.